If you trace your finger to the northwest corner of North America, the map runs out of lines before it runs out of land. That's Alaska, a territory so vast that it reshapes your sense of distance, more than 1.7 million square kilometers. Twice the size of Texas, and yet, fewer than 750,000 people live here. Most of them clustered in a handful of towns, leaving the rest to mountains, glaciers, rivers, and silence. Alaska stretches from the Pacific to the Arctic, from rainforest to tundra. In the south, spruce trees rise from mossy valleys brushed by ocean fog. In the north, the landscape flattens into a treeless expanse where the ground stays frozen most of the year. Between the two lies a world of extremes, where you can drive for hours without seeing another human being, but never without seeing nature. This is not an empty land. It's alive in ways that are hard to imagine until you stand here. The tides in Cook Inlet rise higher than buildings. Glaciers flow like slow rivers of ice, carving valleys as they move. Volcanoes smoke quietly beneath snowcaps. Brown bears fish in streams filled with salmon returning from the sea. Eagles watch from the treetops, their calls echoing across the bays. Summer brings nearly endless daylight. Up to 22 hours of sun in Fairbanks. People stay outside until midnight, hiking, fishing, or just watching the light fade slowly behind the mountains. Then winter flips the balance. Darkness takes over, the temperatures plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius, and the aurora borealis dances above frozen lakes. Every season feels absolute, demanding adaptation, but rewarding those who stay. Alaska's name comes from the Aleut word Alyeska, meaning the Great Land. It's an old name for a place that still feels young, geologically active, constantly reshaping itself. The land rises and falls with tectonic pressure. Ice melts and reforms. Forests grow back after fires. It's a living system in motion, and every traveler who comes here becomes part of that rhythm, however briefly. For centuries, this was the territory of indigenous nations, the Inupiat, Yupik, Tlingit, Haida, Athabaskan, and many others. Their traditions, languages, and knowledge of the land are still vital here. The word frontier often suggests something untouched, but Alaska has always been inhabited, known, and named. The real frontier today is not a physical boundary. It's how humans learn to coexist with a landscape that resists control. Traveling across Alaska means confronting scale, the distance between towns, the time it takes to move, and the way silence fills the air when you stop the engine. You start to measure your day not in hours, but in horizons. Every turn on the road reveals another range, another valley, another stretch of water that seems to have no end. From the deck of a ferry on the inside passage, the coast looks infinite. Cliffs draped in mist, waterfalls sliding into the sea, humpback whales breaking the surface. From the window of a small plane, mountains stretch in every direction, and glaciers glitter like frozen rivers of light. What looks harsh from afar is full of detail up close. The crunch of ice under your boots, the smell of salt and pine, the sound of ravens over the tundra. Alaska isn't a destination you simply visit. It's an encounter with scale, with weather, with time itself. At the edge of the map, you realize that the word wild isn't about danger or distance. It's about perspective. Here, the world feels larger, and so do you. Anchorage sits between the sea and the mountains, a city surrounded by the raw landscapes that define Alaska. On one side, the waters of Cook Inlet spread toward the horizon. On the other, the Chugach Mountains rise abruptly, their snow lines visible even in midsummer. Nearly 40% of Alaska's population lives here. Yet wilderness begins just beyond the last traffic light. Founded in 1914 as a construction camp for the Alaska Railroad, Anchorage grew into the state's main connection point, a logistical heart where air routes, shipping lanes, and highways converge. It's the place where most journeys into Alaska begin. But unlike most gateways, this one doesn't stand apart from nature. It's built inside it. From downtown, it takes only 15 minutes to reach the edge of Chugach State Park, 500,000 acres of alpine ridges, glacial valleys, and moose-filled forests. On clear days, Denali itself appears on the northern horizon, a white pyramid more than 200 kilometers away. The city's skyline seems small beneath it, as if to remind visitors that Anchorage is only a brief interruption in the vastness. Life here follows the rhythm of the seasons. In summer, locals take advantage of the long days. Cyclists and joggers fill the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail, a paved route that stretches 11 miles along the shoreline. From there, it's common to spot beluga whales following the tide, or to see a moose grazing in the wetlands just beyond the path. The air smells of salt and spruce. The sound of seaplanes mixes with the calls of gulls. Anchorage is home to the world's busiest floatplane base, Lake Hood. Every few minutes, another small aircraft lifts off from the water, carrying mail, supplies, or travelers to towns unreachable by road. From above, the city looks like a patchwork of blue lakes and green spaces. Evidence that even here, civilization hasn't replaced the landscape, only learned to fit within it. In winter, the mood shifts but doesn't slow. When snow covers the streets and daylight shrinks to a few hours, the city becomes a hub for cold weather adventures. Cross-country skiers glide through city parks, and ice sculptors transform downtown squares during the annual Fur Rendezvous Festival. Locals bundle up and continue on, because in Anchorage, winter isn't a pause. It's a season to be lived through, not waited out. Culturally, Anchorage reflects the diversity of the state itself. The Anchorage Museum combines art, science, and history, with exhibits on indigenous life, Arctic ecology, and Alaska's transformation through oil and aviation. Nearby, the Alaska Native Heritage Center hosts performances and workshops that share the traditions of the 11 major indigenous groups who call this land home. The sound of drums and the rhythm of dance connect the modern city to its ancient roots. Despite being a city of nearly 300,000, Anchorage never feels detached from the wild. Bears have been spotted wandering near neighborhoods, and eagles nest on light poles by the highway. A moose can block traffic at midday and nobody honks. They simply wait. Here, the boundary between human and nature remains thin, negotiated daily. When evening falls, the Chugach peaks turn gold, and the light spreads across Cook Inlet in wide reflections. The city glows, small and human beneath the open sky. For travelers, Anchorage isn't just a stopover. It's a reminder that modern life and wilderness don't have to be opposites. They can exist side by side. Sharing the same horizon, the same air, the same restless energy that defines Alaska itself. In the heart of Alaska rises a mountain so tall it creates its own weather. Denali, the high one in the Athabascan language, stands at 6,190 meters, the highest peak in North America. It dominates everything around it, not just in height, but in presence. On clear days, the mountain appears suddenly above the horizon, its snow-covered ridges catching the light, while everything below lies in shadow. It's a sight that stops conversations and silences engines. Denali National Park and Preserve covers more than 24,000 square kilometers, an area larger than some countries. There's only one road through it, a 92-mile route that begins near the small community of Healy and winds west into the wild interior. Beyond the first few miles, private cars aren't allowed. Visitors continue by park bus, bike, or on foot, a system designed to protect the fragile tundra and keep the wilderness intact. The further you go, the quieter it becomes, until even the sound of the engine feels out of place. The landscape shifts constantly. At the park's entrance, spruce and birch forests line the valleys, filled with the chatter of chickadees and the rustle of squirrels. As the road climbs, trees thin out into tundra, where dwarf shrubs and wildflowers cling to the ground. Above that, everything becomes stone, ice, and light. Glacial rivers cut across the plains, carrying fine gray silt that sparkles in the sun. In the distance, Denali's twin peaks rise from a chain of smaller mountains, still massive but dwarfed beside it. Wildlife thrives in this expanse. Grizzly bears graze on berries along the slopes, their fur glinting in shades of golden brown. Caribou move in herds across the tundra, their antlers like branches against the sky. Dall sheep rest on cliffs so steep they look impossible to reach. Golden eagles patrol the valleys, and Arctic ground squirrels whistle warnings from their burrows. Here, every creature moves according to its own rhythm, untouched by fences or schedules. For climbers, Denali is one of the most challenging ascents on Earth. The air is thinner here than at similar altitudes elsewhere because of the latitude. Storms can arrive without warning. Temperatures can drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius even in summer. And the sheer vertical rise from base to summit, over 5,000 meters, rivals that of Everest. Each year, a few hundred mountaineers attempt it. Most through the Kahiltna Glacier route. Roughly half reach the top. Those who do say it's less a triumph and more a moment of quiet disbelief. Standing on a peak where the horizon curves away in every direction. But you don't have to climb to feel Denali's power. Even from the valley floor, when the mountain finally appears, after hours or days of hiding behind clouds, it feels like the world has opened. The sunlight touches its upper slopes, turning white snow to faint gold. Around you, the air is still. No narration, no noise. Just the scale of the land reminds you how small and temporary human movement is here. Visitors experience Denali in many ways, through guided hikes across tundra trails, through the wildlife bus tours that stop when animals cross the road, or simply by standing still and watching the clouds move. Every direction leads to something vast, an open valley, a glacial river, a mountain face you can't fit in a frame. It's not a park designed to be conquered. It's a landscape that asks for attention, patience, and respect. When evening arrives, the light softens across the hills, and the peaks fade into a pale blue haze. In that moment, Denali feels less like a place and more like an idea, a reminder of what remains untamed, even in the modern world. And that's why people come, not to master the mountain, but to see what it means to stand in its shadow. 200 kilometers north of Anchorage, where three rivers meet, the Talkeetna, the Chulitna, and the Susitna, stands a village that feels like the edge of adventure itself. Talkeetna is small, with just a few hundred residents, but its name carries weight far beyond its size. For more than half a century, it has been the starting point for most expeditions to Denali. Every climber who heads for the mountain eventually passes through here, drawn by necessity and tradition. The town looks like it has been frozen in time. Wooden boardwalks, hand-painted signs, and log cabins line Main Street. The local air smells of spruce and coffee. Behind the small cafes and gear shops, the roar of floatplane engines punctuates the silence. Lake Talkeetna, next to the airstrip, is one of Alaska's busiest launch sites for bush planes, small aircraft equipped to land on glaciers or gravel bars. Pilots here are legends in their own right. Their names are known among mountaineers across the world. They are the link between civilization and the high, white world of Denali. Before climbing season begins, the streets fill with people in down jackets and heavy boots. They come from all corners of the globe, their luggage packed with ropes, carabiners, and the quiet tension that precedes a big ascent. Inside the Talkeetna Ranger Station, they attend mandatory briefings about weather conditions, avalanche risks, and altitude protocols. Maps are spread across wooden tables, and last-minute decisions are made based on the latest forecast. Around here, weather isn't background, it's command. Flights to base camp depend on visibility, winds, and temperature. A storm in the Alaska range can ground aircraft for days, stranding teams in town or on the mountain. When flights are delayed, life in Talkeetna slows down. Climbers linger in cafes, locals trade weather stories, and time takes on a softer rhythm. The atmosphere feels communal, bound by shared patience. A chalkboard at the airstrip lists flight updates, though everyone knows that nature decides, not the schedule. The moment the clouds clear, pilots and climbers rush to prepare. Engines start, propellers slice the air, and within minutes, the planes lift off toward the mountains, leaving ripples on the lake's surface. Talkeetna's history is older than its climbing fame. The town began in the early 1900s as a supply base for the Alaska Railroad, serving trappers, gold prospectors, and river traders. Many of its historic buildings still stand. The roadhouse from 1917 still serves breakfast to travelers. And the Fairview Inn, once a saloon, still hosts live music for locals and visitors who end up staying longer than planned. There's no rush here. The rhythm of the place matches the pulse of the landscape. For visitors not chasing summits, Talkeetna offers its own kind of adventure. River rafting along the Susitna, flight-seeing tours over Denali and the Ruth Glacier, hiking through spruce forests alive with bird calls, all within reach of a few square blocks. In summer, daylight lingers past midnight, and locals gather by the riverside to fish or watch the alpenglow settle on distant peaks. Yet no matter how calm the evening feels, the weather remains the silent authority. A sudden drop in temperature, a bank of fog, or shifting winds can rewrite the day's plans. People here read the sky as others read news, scanning for clues, learning to wait. In Talkeetna, every arrival and departure is dictated by the mountain. It's a town built on anticipation, on stories told over coffee while waiting for the clouds to lift. And when they finally do, revealing Denali sharp and white above the horizon, everyone stops, locals, travelers, pilots, to look. For a moment, everything stands still. Then life resumes. measured again by wind, light, and the next flight into the unknown. At the end of the Seward Highway, where the mountains meet the sea, lies a small harbor town that feels like the threshold of two worlds, land and ocean, rock and ice. Seward, founded in 1903 and named after the U.S. Secretary who purchased Alaska, is more than a dot on the map. It's the starting point for one of the most spectacular marine landscapes on Earth, Kenai Fjords National Park. The town hugs Resurrection Bay, a deep, ice-carved inlet that never fully freezes, even in winter. Its waters are cold and alive, home to sea otters that float on their backs, harbor seals that vanish with a ripple, and orcas that slice through the surface like living arrows. Fishing boats return with salmon and halibut. Tour vessels load up with travelers eager to see the wild Alaska that begins just beyond the breakwater. From the harbor, the route westward opens into a maze of fjords, steep glacial valleys flooded by the sea. This is where the power of ice becomes tangible. Holgate Glacier. Deep blue and creased with centuries of compression, calves into the water with a crack that echoes like thunder. Ayalik Glacier, broader and taller still, towers over the bay, shedding chunks the size of small buildings into the ocean below. The water froths white with newborn ice, and a wave ripples outward, rocking the boats that wait silently nearby. Seward is also a place where the wilderness remains within arm's reach. Trails like Exit Glacier bring visitors close enough to trace the glacial retreat through dated signposts, marking where the ice once stood. A stark reminder of the planet's shifting climate. On the Kenai Fjords cruises, humpback whales breach in the distance, puffins skim the surface, and sea lions lounge on sunlit rocks, as if posing for the cameras that inevitably follow. Yet beyond the postcard views, there's a rhythm to life here. Slow, practical, and guided by weather. Locals read the ocean before the sky. Fishermen and guides plan each day around tides, wind, and visibility. In summer, the daylight stretches late into the night, painting the harbor gold. In winter, the town quiets, wrapped in snow and solitude, but the mountains stand just as tall, the fjords just as immense. Visitors often describe Seward as the edge of the map. But that's not quite true. It's where the map comes alive. A living meeting point between the human and the elemental. Here you don't just look at nature, you move within it. The sea mist clings to your jacket. The sound of ice breaking carries through the bay. The air tastes of salt and cold stone. Few places show the power of ice more vividly than Kenai Fjords National Park, where mountains, glaciers, and ocean collide in an endless cycle of movement and change. Covering nearly 1,000 square miles of the Kenai Peninsula, the park is shaped and continually reshaped by one force: the Harding Icefield. Stretching across more than 700 square miles, the Harding Icefield is a frozen plateau of staggering depth. In some places over 1,500 meters thick. From its core, more than 30 glaciers flow outward like white rivers, carving valleys, feeding fjords, and meeting the Pacific with thunderous force. When the air is still, you can hear them breathe, a low groan, a crack, a slow slide as gravity pulls ice toward the sea. Standing on the edge of this landscape is like looking at time itself. The ice beneath your feet predates civilization. Each layer holds centuries of snowfall, compressed into memory. From the Harding ice field, you can watch the peaks of the Kenai Mountains rise like dark islands in a frozen ocean. And in the distance, Exit Glacier snakes down toward the valley, the park's most accessible window into this ancient process. But what defines Kenai Fjords isn't just ice, it's life. Harbor seals haul out on drifting icebergs, using them as safe platforms to rest and raise their pups away from predators. Kittiwakes and puffins wheel through the mist, their calls echoing against sheer cliffs. Sea otters float belly up, cracking shells, while below the surface plankton blooms in cold, nutrient-rich water, feeding fish, birds, and whales alike. The ecosystem here is a living chain, every link dependent on the chill that flows from the glaciers. That chain, however, is under pressure. The park's glaciers are retreating, visibly, measurably, year by year. Exit Glacier has receded more than 2 kilometers since the 19th century. Its former edges now marked by wooden posts, dated like a timeline of loss. Scientists and rangers use these shifts to study how warming temperatures reshape not just ice, but the ecosystems and communities that depend on it. Meltwater swells rivers earlier each spring, fish migration patterns shift, and the balance between sea and land subtly changes. Still, Kenai Fjords remains a place of wonder, not frozen in time, but alive with transformation. Visitors hike the Harding Icefield Trail, watching as the world turns from green forest to gray moraine to endless white. From boats in Glacier Bay, they witness glaciers calvening, vast towers of ice collapsing into the sea, sending shockwaves through the water and air. It's not spectacle, it's process, the planet in motion. At the end of Alaska's Sterling Highway, where the land narrows into a thin finger of gravel reaching into Kachemak Bay, lies Homer. A town that feels like both an ending and a beginning. Locals call it the end of the road. But for travelers, it's often where Alaska truly begins to sink in. The stillness, the sea, the feeling of standing on the edge of something immense. The heart of Homer is the Spit, a 4.5-mile strip of land that juts into the bay like a pier built by nature. On one side, fishing boats and sea kayaks drift with the tides. On the other, bald eagles perch on driftwood, watching over the harbor. The wind is constant here. It smells of salt, diesel, and seaweed. And it carries the cries of gulls circling above the docks. The rhythm of life beats to the sound of the tide and the rumble of engines heading out to sea. Homer is one of Alaska's fishing capitals. Known worldwide for its halibut, massive, flat-bodied fish that can weigh over 100 kilograms. Each summer, boats head out from the small boat harbor. Crews preparing lines, bait, and coffee for long days on the water. Tourists join charter trips, reeling in fish nearly as tall as themselves, posing for photos against a backdrop of snow-tipped volcanoes across the bay. Mount Augustine, Mount Iliamna, and Mount Redoubt rising like watchtowers from the sea. But beyond fishing, Homer's spirit runs deep in creativity. When the storms close in and the horizon disappears behind gray mist, this remote town turns inward into art. The Homer art scene thrives in galleries, studios, and cozy cafes where wood stoves crackle and locals gather with sketchbooks, guitars, and steaming mugs of coffee. Murals of marine life color the walls. Handmade jewelry reflects the light like wet pebbles. Every piece seems tied to the land and the water that shape daily life here. The Pratt Museum captures that connection, telling stories of Kachemak Bay's ecology and people. From native Alutiiq traditions to modern-day fishermen. Outside, trails lead through spruce forest to viewpoints over the bay, where sea otters float in pairs, spinning slowly in the kelp beds. Across the water, the Kachemak Bay State Park calls adventurers with its untouched coves and glacier-fed streams, reachable only by boat or small plane. In the evenings, Homer slows. The harbor quiets, the air cools, and the sun lingers low on the horizon, painting the bay in gold and rose. Locals and travelers gather on the beach to watch the light fade behind the mountains. Someone lights a fire. Guitars come out. Conversations mix languages and stories from every corner of the world. The sense of isolation becomes something softer, solitude, chosen and embraced. To be in Homer is to understand Alaska's dual nature, its harshness and its gentleness. The sea can turn violent in an instant, but on calm mornings it mirrors the sky so perfectly that horizon and reflection disappear into one. Life here requires resilience, whether you're hauling nets in the rain, carving driftwood art, or simply weathering another long winter. Yet it rewards with a peace few places offer. Homer doesn't demand to be conquered or explained. It invites you to slow down, breathe the salt air, and listen to the creak of boats, the distant call of eagles, and the steady pulse of a town that lives at the very edge of the map. If Alaska is a world unto itself, then the Kenai Peninsula is that world condensed. A landscape where every face of the state comes together within a single stretch of land. Locals call it Alaska in miniature. Here, in just a day's drive, you can move from coastal fjords to mountain glaciers. From quiet tundra to salmon-filled rivers, from modern highways to villages that still echo the songs of Russian settlers. The journey begins south of Anchorage, along the Seward Highway, one of the most scenic routes in North America. The road hugs the edge of Turnagain Arm, a narrow inlet where tides surge with astonishing speed. The Boar tide can rise several meters in minutes, curling like a single moving wall of water. On clear days, beluga whales follow the tide in, their pale backs gleaming in the sun. To the left, the Chugach Mountains tower above, their slopes alive with waterfalls, eagles and clouds shifting like slow smoke. Further south, the landscape opens into the heart of the Kenai, a patchwork of rivers, forests, and mountain valleys. The Kenai River, bright turquoise from glacial silt, winds its way from Kenai Lake to Cook Inlet. drawing anglers from around the world. In summer, its banks come alive with salmon runs. Red, silver, and king salmon pushing upstream in numbers so great that the water seems to shimmer. Locals fish elbow to elbow, while brown bears patrol the shallows a few bends away. The road forks west toward Soldotna and Kenai, where the land flattens into wetlands and coastal plains. Here, traces of history appear in unexpected places. The onion-domed Russian Orthodox churches in Ninilchik and Kenai are reminders of the region's 19th century past. When Russian traders settled the coast, their descendants still live here, keeping language, recipes, and rituals alive. Wooden crosses stand on green hills overlooking the sea, framed by driftwood fences and wildflowers. It's a quiet connection between old worlds and new frontiers. Driving east again toward Cooper Landing, the road climbs through valleys of spruce and birch. Rafting trips cut through the Kenai Canyon, where cold spray hits your face as bald eagles dive overhead. The air smells of moss and wet stone. Mountains rise sharp and close, their peaks streaked with snow even in July. From here, you can detour toward Hope, a small gold rush town that still looks much like it did a century ago. A few log cabins, a cafe with live music, and views across Turnagain Arm that glow orange at sunset. Every curve of the peninsula seems to shift character. 1 hour, you're in deep forest. The next, standing on a black sand beach watching fishing boats return under gull-filled skies. The Sterling Highway leads you past lakes that mirror the sky, over rivers thick with salmon, through towns where everyone waves as you drive by. In the end, that's what makes the Kenai Peninsula so compelling. Its density of experience. Within a few hundred kilometers, you meet every face of Alaska, its wilderness, its people, its living history. You can hike along glacial valleys in the morning, eat smoked salmon in a harbor cafe by noon, and end the day watching the midnight sun dissolve behind the mountains. The Kenai doesn't just show you Alaska, it lets you feel it. In the weight of river air, in the hum of distant engines, in the quiet between tides. Every turn of the road brings a new version of the same vast truth. That the last frontier isn't one place, but many. All alive, all connected, and all waiting within reach. At first glance, Prince William Sound feels endless, a labyrinth of waterways and islands, steep mountains plunging straight into the sea, and glaciers that seem to breathe with the tides. It stretches over 25,000 square kilometers. A world of fjords and inlets fed by more than 150 glaciers, including over a dozen that reach the ocean as tidewater glaciers. Here, the rhythm of life is set not by roads or cities, but by the slow pulse of ice meeting saltwater. Most journeys begin in Whittier or Valdez, small coastal towns framed by peaks that hold snow year-round. From there, the sea becomes the highway. Kayaks, ferries, and small expedition boats glide across the still surface, moving through water so calm it mirrors the mountains. When the sun breaks through the mist, the entire landscape reflects. The glaciers, the clouds, even the smallest bird, as if the world has folded in on itself. The silence is profound. Then comes a low, distant crack, the unmistakable sound of ice calving. A moment later, a wall of blue ice shears off a glacier face, collapsing into the bay with a roar that echoes for kilometers. Waves ripple outward, rocking the boats gently. In that instant, the scale of the sound reveals itself, not static, but alive. Reshaping itself with every falling block of ice. Among the most visited glaciers are Columbia, Mears, and Blackstone, each with its own personality. Columbia Glacier, once the second largest tidewater glacier in North America, has retreated more than 20 kilometers since the 1980s, one of the fastest retreats ever recorded. Yet even as it recedes, it commands awe. A shimmering wall of compressed blue rising from the sea, fractured like stained glass. Blackstone Bay, by contrast, offers serenity. Narrow channels where waterfalls plunge directly into the water and seals rest on drifting ice floes, unbothered by passing kayaks. Wildlife defines the sound as much as its glaciers. Sea otters float on their backs, grooming and cracking shellfish with stones. Harbor seals haul themselves onto small bergs, basking in the weak Arctic sun. Puffins dive like arrows into the water, while kittiwakes swarm the cliffs in bright, chaotic motion. And occasionally, the surface breaks, the black dorsal fin of an orca slicing through the reflection. Pods of humpback whales feed here in summer, their breath rising like smoke above the mirror-smooth surface before they dive again, tails lifting into the air. For travelers, Prince William Sound is best explored slowly. By kayak, by small boat, or even from the deck of the Alaska Marine Highway ferry. Which weaves through the islands and narrow channels. Each bend brings a new kind of stillness. The quiet of fog closing around the water, the hiss of light rain on the surface, the sudden brightness of a glacier revealed through cloud. The experience isn't about distance covered, but immersion, in sound, in light, in the feeling of floating between ice and sea. Yet amid the beauty lies fragility. The Sound, still recovering from the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, is a reminder of how easily such a balance can break. While marine life has rebounded in part, scars remain, not visible in the reflection of the water, but present in its history. Scientists and local communities work to protect this delicate network of bays and islands, ensuring that future generations can still paddle through these same silent corridors of ice. To be in Prince William Sound is to experience a world pared down to its essentials: water, ice, light, and silence. It is Alaska's soul, distilled, powerful, unpredictable, and humbling. Out here, time stretches, sound disappears, and the only measure of the day is the slow drift of glaciers toward the waiting sea. If Anchorage is Alaska's gateway to the wild, Fairbanks is its heart, beating steadily in the middle of the state, far from the coasts, deep in the subarctic interior. Life here is defined by extremes. Temperatures that swing from plus 30 degrees C in July to 40 degrees Celsius in January, 22 hours of sunlight in summer, and long polar nights in winter when the sun barely skims the horizon. And yet, people don't just endure Fairbanks, they thrive in it. The city began as a gold rush outpost in the early 1900s, its name taken from a U.S. senator who had never set foot here. A century later, it's grown into the second largest city in Alaska, a community of scientists, artists, miners, and adventurers who have learned to live in rhythm with one of Earth's harshest environments. Wooden houses lean against snowbanks, smoke rising from chimneys. Trucks are left idling in supermarket parking lots to keep engines from freezing. The air in midwinter feels almost metallic, so cold that breath crystallizes instantly. But with the cold comes beauty. Fairbanks is one of the best places on Earth to see the aurora borealis. From late August through April, the northern lights dance across the sky on clear nights, shifting in green, purple, and crimson arcs that ripple like silk. The phenomenon is caused by charged particles from the sun colliding with gases in Earth's atmosphere, oxygen producing green and red light, nitrogen creating blue and violet. Locals simply call it the lights, and even after decades, they still step outside when the forecast looks good. Silence falls as the entire sky seems to move, alive with electric color. In summer, the contrast is total. The midnight sun never truly sets, bathing the city in a golden haze that blurs day and night. At 2 a.m., you can see kids playing baseball, cyclists coasting along the Chena River, and fishermen casting lines from the riverbank. The town's energy surges with festivals, the Midnight Sun Festival, the Tanana Valley Fair, and outdoor concerts that last until dawn. Gardens explode with vegetables grown under 20 hours of light a day. Giant cabbages and zucchinis win prizes at the fair each August. Fairbanks is also a city of science and curiosity. The University of Alaska Fairbanks, UAF, stands on a hill overlooking the Tanana Valley, home to the Geophysical Institute, where researchers study the aurora, permafrost, and Arctic climate. Their data helps track how the far north is changing, from melting ground to shifting ecosystems. The Ice Alaska World Ice Art Championships each March transforms the frozen Chena Lake into a luminous sculpture park, where artists carve massive blocks of ice into delicate towers, dragons, and frozen temples. At night, floodlights turn the carvings into glowing blue crystal. Not far from the city, the Chena Hot Springs offer another kind of magic, steaming pools surrounded by snow. In winter, bathers sit half submerged in 40 degrees Celsius mineral water while the air around them freezes. Steam rises into the dark, and sometimes the aurora flares overhead, its colors reflecting off the water's surface. It's a rare moment in Alaska. Warmth in the middle of ice, silence under the sky's most spectacular show. Fairbanks isn't polished or easy. Roads crack in the cold, daylight vanishes for weeks, and still, people stay, drawn by the space, the community, and the raw honesty of life lived this close to nature's edge. It's a place that teaches resilience, patience, and wonder. In the end, Fairbanks isn't just the geographic center of Alaska, it's the emotional one too. A town that reminds you that even at 40, the world can still burn with color. In the clear, cold skies of Alaska, there are nights when the darkness isn't empty, it's alive. Curtains of light sweep across the horizon, rising, folding, and dissolving in complete silence. This is the aurora borealis, the northern lights, not just a sight, but an experience that anchors the identity of the north. The aurora begins far beyond the Earth. In the solar wind, a stream of charged particles constantly emitted by the sun. When these particles reach our planet, they're drawn toward the magnetic poles, funneled into the upper atmosphere. There, about 100 to 300 kilometers above the ground, they collide with atoms of oxygen and nitrogen, releasing energy in the form of light. Green and yellow hues come from oxygen, red and violet from nitrogen. The colors vary with altitude, temperature, and the intensity of the solar storm. What looks like magic is, in fact, physics written across the sky. Alaska lies directly under the auroral oval, the zone of highest aurora activity around the magnetic pole. The best viewing region stretches through Fairbanks, the Brooks Range, and the remote Arctic communities north of the Yukon River. On clear winter nights, far from city lights, the aurora can appear more than 200 times a year. Flickering faintly at first, then brightening into wide, fluid ribbons that twist and shimmer like liquid fire. The most reliable viewing season is from late August to early April, when darkness returns to the subarctic sky. The lights peak between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Those strong magnetic storms can light up the horizon at any hour. Local forecasts based on solar data predict aurora activity days in advance. In Fairbanks, entire lodges and research stations, like the Aurora Viewing Center and Poker Flat Research Range, are devoted to both observing and studying this phenomenon. But no explanation fully prepares you for what it feels like to stand beneath it. The night is silent except for the crunch of snow under your boots. The air freezes inside your lungs. Above, a pale arc stretches across the stars, then begins to move. Slowly at first, then with impossible grace, it unfurls in long glowing ribbons that ripple from horizon to horizon. The green intensifies to white, flashes of purple and red trace its edges, and for a few minutes, it feels as if the entire sky is breathing. Then, as suddenly as it began, it fades, leaving only darkness and the faint echo of what you've just seen. For Alaska's indigenous peoples, the aurora has always carried meaning. The Inupiat of the north once said the lights were the spirits of animals and ancestors playing across the sky. Some believed they were the souls of hunters, their movements reflecting the rhythm of life and death. In the Athabascan tradition, the lights were thought to be messages, and whistling at them was forbidden, a sign of respect for what lay beyond human understanding. Today, these beliefs blend with modern science, reminding visitors that the aurora is both a natural event and a cultural inheritance. To witness the northern lights is to experience both knowledge and mystery at once. Science can describe the process, measure the particles, and forecast the storms, but it can't explain the quiet awe that takes hold when you see them move. In Alaska, the aurora isn't rare, it's part of life. Yet no one grows used to it. Whether it appears as a faint green glow above Fairbanks, or a full sky explosion over the Brooks Range, it reminds everyone who looks up that even in the coldest, darkest corners of the planet, light is never far away. A few hours north of Fairbanks, the forest begins to thin. Spruce trees shrink, spaced farther apart. The road straightens and rises toward a horizon that feels impossibly wide. A small roadside sign marks the moment. Arctic Circle, latitude 66°33' north. Beyond this point, for at least one day each summer, the sun never sets. You've entered the true north, a landscape defined not by what grows, but by what endures. The Dalton Highway, a 666-kilometer gravel road built in the 1970s to service the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, is one of the loneliest routes in America. It runs from Livengood, north of Fairbanks, all the way to Deadhorse on the shores of the Arctic Ocean. For much of its length, it parallels the silver arc of the pipeline, a steel lifeline that carries crude oil from Prudhoe Bay, to the port of Valdez. The highway passes through wilderness so vast that between fuel stops, there are hundreds of kilometers of silence, broken only by wind, the hum of engines, and the calls of ravens riding the air currents. Crossing the Arctic Circle isn't dramatic at first. There's no sudden change in color or terrain. But soon you notice what's missing. Tall trees give way to tundra, an endless expanse of low shrubs, moss, and lichen growing on permafrost, the permanently frozen ground that lies just beneath the surface. In summer, the top layer thaws into a spongy carpet that glows green and gold under 24 hours of sunlight. In winter, the landscape hardens into a world of white and silver, where rivers freeze mid-current and the air carries the faint scent of iron and snow. Life here runs on a rhythm of necessity. The Dalton Highway is a working road built for truckers hauling fuel, supplies, and heavy equipment to the oil fields at Prudhoe Bay. It's a lifeline for remote communities and Arctic research stations. The truckers who drive it work in brutal conditions, temperatures dropping below 40 degrees Celsius, black ice forming without warning, and blizzards that can erase visibility in seconds. Yet, they speak of it with pride. Out here, reliability matters more than speed, and trust between drivers can mean survival. Small outposts break the monotony. Coldfoot, once a gold rush camp, now serves as a truck stop and lodging for travelers chasing the midnight sun or the aurora. Nearby, the Arctic Interagency Visitor Center tells the story of this extreme ecosystem. Caribou herds that migrate across the tundra, musk oxen grazing against the wind, and Arctic foxes whose coats turn from brown to pure white with the seasons. The Yukon River, one of North America's great waterways, flows beneath a steel bridge, frozen solid in winter, roaring and brown in spring thaw. As the highway continues north, the Brooks Range rises ahead, jagged mountains slicing through the tundra, forming the last great barrier before the Arctic Ocean. Their peaks remain snow-covered even in midsummer, and beyond them lies a world where trees vanish completely, and the horizon stretches into the pale Arctic light. Crossing into the Arctic Circle isn't about reaching a specific point on the map. It's about confronting scale. Here, distance and time blur. The sun circles the sky without setting. Shadows spin instead of lengthening. In this perpetual light, colors appear sharper. The red of tundra moss, the gleam of river ice, the deep blue of the distant mountains. Few places make you feel smaller or more alive. The Arctic Circle is not just a boundary of latitude, it's a threshold of perception. Everything slows down. Every sound carries farther. The world seems stripped to its essentials: earth, wind, water, and cold. And as the Dalton Highway continues into the far north, the realization settles in. Beyond this line, you're no longer just in Alaska. You're in the Arctic, a place that tests endurance, demands respect, and rewards those who listen to its silence. The Brooks Range rises suddenly from the tundra like the spine of a sleeping giant, a stretch of ancient rock running 1,100 kilometers across northern Alaska, dividing the boreal forest from the true Arctic. Few roads touch it, and even fewer people live here. This is one of the last great wildernesses of North America, remote, unbroken, and almost silent. To reach it, travelers follow the Dalton Highway as it winds north from Coldfoot into the gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve. A vast, roadless expanse larger than many countries. There are no visitor centers, no marked trails, no cell phone signal. Access comes by small bush plane or by foot along river valleys that carve their way through shale and granite. In summer, the tundra blooms briefly with purple lupine, Arctic cotton, and fireweed, painting the slopes with color under a sun that never sets. In winter, the landscape returns to its natural palette, white, gray, and blue, and temperatures can fall below 50 degrees Celsius. This is caribou country. The western Arctic and porcupine herds, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, migrate across the Brooks Range each year. An ancient rhythm older than human memory. They move from their calving grounds on the Arctic coastal plain to their wintering areas farther south, crossing rivers, valleys, and snowfields. For the Inupiat and Gwich'in peoples who have lived here for millennia, these migrations are not just a spectacle, but a lifeline, shaping traditions, diet, and identity. The caribou are seen as kin, and the health of the herds is tied to the balance of the land. The Brooks Range is alive even in stillness. Wolves follow the caribou trails, silent and patient. Arctic foxes dart among the willows, their coats changing from brown to white with the turning of the seasons. In the river valleys, grizzly bears forage for roots and fish, and golden eagles glide above the cliffs, watching for movement below. The ecosystem is delicate, every creature adapted to a world of extremes, where summer lasts only a few months and survival depends on precision. Conservation here means restraint. Gates of the Arctic National Park, established in 1980, was created not to attract visitors, but to preserve wilderness itself, to protect a landscape untrammeled by man. There are no permanent facilities, and the National Park Service intentionally leaves it that way. The goal is not development, but protection, allowing ecological processes to continue undisturbed. Scientists and indigenous leaders work together to monitor climate change, which is reshaping this environment faster than anywhere else on Earth. Permafrost is thawing, river ice is forming later, and the timing of migrations is shifting. Small signs of a vast change moving through the Arctic system. For those who venture here, the experience is humbling. The Brooks Range offers no spectacle built for cameras, no marked viewpoints or visitor trails. Its beauty is subtle and immense, revealed in the movement of light across the tundra, the echo of water under melting ice, the faint scent of lichen and stone. In the endless daylight of summer, the mountains cast long shadows that never quite fade. Rivers like the Koyukuk and Anaktuvuk cut silver paths through the valleys, and clouds drift low enough to brush the peaks. It's a place that resists ownership, too large to conquer, too quiet to romanticize. Standing here, you feel time differently. The silence is not emptiness but presence. The deep, steady rhythm of a land that has existed for millions of years. In the Brooks Range, the noise of the modern world falls away. What remains is purity, cold air, stone, and the steady pulse of the North itself. At the very top of Alaska, where the land gives way to the Arctic Ocean, lies Utqiagvik, known for generations as Barrow. This is the northernmost community in the United States, a place closer to the North Pole than to Anchorage, where geography itself feels like a statement of endurance. Here, the map ends, and human adaptation begins. Utqiagvik is home to roughly 4,500 people, most of them Inupiat, the indigenous people of Alaska's far north. Life here has always revolved around the rhythm of the ice and the sea. For centuries, the community has relied on subsistence hunting and whaling, a tradition passed down through countless generations. Each spring, crews venture onto the sea ice in small boats, waiting for the bowhead whales to migrate along the coast. The hunt is conducted with deep respect. Every part of the whale is used, shared, and celebrated in community feasts that mark both survival and gratitude. In Utqiagvik, light and darkness define the year as much as temperature or tide. From mid-November to late January, the sun never rises. The long polar night is lit by the glow of porch lamps, the flicker of auroras, and the steady hum of generators. Then, in May, the balance flips. The sun returns and refuses to set, circling the sky in endless daylight for nearly 3 months. It's a place where time feels elastic, and daily life bends to the Arctic's extremes. Children walk to school under green ribbons of aurora borealis, their boots crunching over snow as huskies bark in the distance. Elders gather in warm houses to share stories, how the stars guide travelers, how the ice speaks before it breaks. Outside town, the sea ice creaks and cracks, shifting with the tide. You can stand at the water's edge and watch as the Arctic Ocean breathes, rising, falling, whispering against the frozen shore. Modern life exists alongside ancient rhythm. The town has schools, broadband internet, and an airport that connects it to the rest of Alaska. Yet supply planes are still the lifeline. Food, fuel, and medicine arrive by air when the sea ice closes in. In winter, temperatures drop below 40 degrees Celsius, and wind can strip heat in seconds. Still, people here laugh easily. They play basketball in community centers, ride snow machines to visit neighbors, and gather for Nalukatak, the spring whaling festival where families toss each other into the air on sealskin blankets as a gesture of joy and renewal. Utqiagvik is also a center for Arctic research. Scientists come to study permafrost, sea ice, and the rapid changes reshaping the North. The Inupiat have become key partners in this work, combining traditional knowledge with modern science to track shifts in climate, animal migration, and ocean ice. They speak of changes that are no longer abstract. Thinner ice, later freeze-ups, different wind patterns. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average, and here, the evidence is visible from every window, and yet, life continues, not in defiance, but in continuity. Children learn to speak Inupiaq, to understand the stories hidden in wind and snow. Hunters still look to the horizon for the movement of whales. In the dark months, families gather around oil lamps, sharing food and laughter while the world outside sleeps in blue shadow. Standing on the shore at Utqiagvik, you can look north and see nothing but ice and sky. A landscape stripped of all excess, where every sound carries. The air smells of salt and cold metal. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the polar night stretches toward the pole, and here, at the edge of the world, humanity endures, small in scale, immense in spirit, living not against the Arctic, but with it. The Alaska Railroad stretches nearly 800 kilometers from Seward to Fairbanks. a steel ribbon cutting through forests, mountains, and rivers that define the heart of the state. More than a route, it's a living timeline, tracing Alaska's transformation from wilderness to settlement, from gold rush camps to modern towns. Every journey along these tracks feels like a condensed version of the state itself. Vast, unpredictable, and impossibly beautiful. Departing Anchorage, the train glides past the Nick Arm of Cook Inlet, where tidal flats shimmer under the morning light. Moose graze in the marshes beside the line, and the snow-capped Chugach Mountains rise in the distance. Within minutes, the city disappears, replaced by spruce forests and winding streams. The motion of the train sets a rhythm, a slow, steady pulse that carries you deeper into the wild. Built in the early 20th century, the Alaska Railroad was once a lifeline for miners and settlers. It hauled coal, timber, and supplies through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent. Today, it still serves freight and passengers alike, connecting communities that would otherwise be accessible only by air or boat. But for travelers, its main gift is perspective. The ability to watch an entire ecosystem unfold outside your window, uninterrupted. As the route heads north, the scenery changes with every curve. The train crosses the Hurricane Gulch Bridge, suspended 90 meters above a roaring river. It winds through the Susitna Valley, where fishermen cast lines beneath broad skies, and snowmelt streams cut silver lines through the tundra. On clear days, the massive white dome of Denali rises in the distance, a silent landmark towering above the clouds. Inside, the sound of the wheels blends with soft conversation and the occasional creak of the carriage. Guides narrate the journey, pointing out wildlife, a black bear by a stream, a bald eagle perched on a spruce. The glass-domed observation cars offer panoramic views. Sunlight filters through, catching the reflections of passengers leaning against the windows. Every few minutes, a new landscape replaces the last. Birch forests, open plains, mountain passes. In summer, the midnight sun follows the train, keeping the sky bright long after evening. In winter, the same route becomes a white corridor through silence. Snow drifts along the tracks, and the engine cuts through it like a ship through ice. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the aurora borealis appears, faint at first, then rippling above the carriages. A reminder that even here, movement and light never stop. The Alaska Railroad is more than transportation. It's an archive of stories. Each stop, Talkeetna, Denali, Nenana, Fairbanks, holds traces of another era. Prospectors chasing fortune, engineers battling permafrost, families carving homes into the wilderness. Alongside the history, there's a constant sense of motion, of Alaska not as a frozen place, but as one that's alive and shifting, its people and landscapes intertwined. When the train finally rolls into Fairbanks, the air feels drier, the trees shorter, the horizon wider. You've crossed the full spectrum of Alaska in a single day. From the sea to the interior, from temperate forest to subarctic plain. Tucked between steep mountains and a silver-blue channel, Juneau is unlike any other capital city in the United States. You can't drive there. There are no roads connecting it to the rest of Alaska or the continent. Every person, every shipment of food, every piece of mail arrives by boat or plane. That isolation isn't a limitation here. It's a defining feature, a reminder that Alaska's identity begins where the highway ends. Juneau sits along the Gastineau Channel, wedged between the Coast Mountains and the Tongass National Forest, one of the largest temperate rainforests on Earth. From the air, the city looks like a splash of light against an ocean of green. Cruise ships dock downtown during summer, dwarfing the small buildings that line the harbor. Above them, clouds drift low, brushing against mountain slopes covered in spruce and hemlock. Founded during the gold rush of the 1880s, Juneau was built on the promise of discovery. Miners came chasing fortune in narrow valleys cut by ice and rivers. The old mine tunnels still exist, silent and damp reminders of a time when the wilderness seemed endless, and wealth was measured in ounces of ore. Today, government buildings have replaced saloons, and the hum of small planes fills the air where once there were pickaxes. Yet Juneau remains deeply tied to the land around it. The Mendenhall Glacier, just a short drive from the city center, is one of the most accessible glaciers in the world. It stretches 12 miles from the Juneau ice field, a vast plateau of snow and frozen rivers that feeds dozens of glaciers spilling down toward the sea. Visitors hike to the ice's edge or paddle across Mendenhall Lake to hear the cracks and groans of the glacier shifting. A slow-living movement that defines the landscape. You can see the meltwater streams running beneath its surface, carrying the color of crushed stone. Beyond the glacier, whale-watching tours depart from Auka Bay, where humpback whales rise through the still water to breathe, their tails arching into the air before vanishing below. In summer, bald eagles perch on driftwood along the shore, while sea lions bark from nearby buoys. Downtown, just a few streets from the docks, cafes serve fresh salmon, and travelers wander among art galleries displaying carvings and weavings by Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian artists, cultures whose presence long predates the gold rush or the capital itself. Juneau is also a city of contrasts. Government meetings inside marble halls and rain-slicked trails leading directly into the forest. You can finish a workday and, within minutes, be on a mountain trail overlooking glaciers and fjords. The Mount Roberts Tramway lifts visitors from sea level to panoramic views in less than 10 minutes. From there, the city looks small, a cluster of lights caught between wilderness and water, dwarfed by the sheer scale of its surroundings. For those who live here, the isolation is both a challenge and a comfort. Winter storms can delay ferries and ground flights for days. Groceries cost more. And sometimes the world feels very far away. Yet, ask any local, and they'll tell you the same thing. This separation gives Juneau its soul. The connection to the land, the rhythm of the tides, the ever-present sound of rain. These things shape daily life as much as politics or commerce. When the evening fog drifts in from the channel and the mountains fade into mist, Juneau feels suspended between sea and sky. A capital not carved out of wilderness, but woven into it. Just 12 miles from downtown Juneau, the Mendenhall Glacier offers a rare experience, the chance to stand face to face with a moving river of ice. It's one of Alaska's most visited natural wonders, not because it's the largest or most remote, but because it brings the power and fragility of glaciers within easy reach. Here, you don't need to trek for days or cross frozen passes. You simply follow a trail and suddenly there it is, vast, silent, and alive. The Mendenhall stretches about 12 miles from the Juneau icefield, an expanse of interconnected glaciers covering over 1,500 square miles of mountains and snowfields. At its face, the ice towers more than 200 feet high, cracked and layered like ancient glass. Its color shifts with the light, from pale gray under clouds to deep luminous blue when the sun breaks through. Each shade tells a story of density and time. Blue for compressed ice that's centuries old. White for the newer snow that's still becoming part of the glacier's body. Visitors reach the glacier through the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center, perched on a hill overlooking Mendenhall Lake. From there, trails fan out, some short and paved, others winding through mossy forest toward closer views. The Nugget Falls Trail leads to a roaring waterfall that crashes into the lake beside the glacier, throwing mist into the air. From the shore, you can watch icebergs drift slowly, melting as they go, their reflections trembling on the surface of the water. Up close, the glacier breathes. You hear it before you feel it. The faint drip of meltwater. The distant echo of ice cracking somewhere deep inside. Streams run beneath your feet, carrying melt through channels carved by time and pressure. The air smells of minerals and cold stone. Every sound seems amplified. Footsteps on gravel. Wind against the lake. The steady rhythm of the melt. But this ice is changing. Over the past half-century, Mendenhall Glacier has retreated more than 3 kilometers, leaving behind a valley of bare rock and young forest. What was once the glacier's edge in the 1950s is now a wooded trail, proof of how fast the landscape evolves. Scientists from the U.S. Forest Service and the University of Alaska monitor its every movement, measuring how temperature, precipitation, and ocean currents reshape the ice. The data tells a simple, sobering truth. Alaska's glaciers are shrinking faster than at any point in recorded history. Still, Mendenhall remains a place of awe. In winter, when temperatures drop low enough, ice caves form beneath its surface, glowing chambers of blue crystal where light bends and dances like liquid. They are dangerous and short-lived. One season they exist, the next they collapse and vanish. Yet for those who see them, they're unforgettable. A reminder of how even in motion and decay, beauty persists. Rangers here speak of a paradox. Mendenhall's retreat makes it more accessible. As new trails and viewpoints emerge where ice once stood, tourists arrive in growing numbers, over 500,000 each summer, drawn by the same desire that has always defined Alaska: to witness nature in its purest form. Standing at the overlook, you can feel both wonder and urgency. The glacier is still magnificent, but its edge pulls back a little more each year. You realize you are watching time move, not in decades, but in footsteps. The meltwater dripping from the ice is the sound of a planet changing, one drop at a time. And yet, when the evening sun glows through the mist, lighting the glacier from within, it still feels eternal. A living monument to Alaska's wild heart, caught between endurance and transformation. At the end of a narrow fjord in southeast Alaska, surrounded by mountains streaked with snow, lies Skagway, a town that feels as though time never fully caught up. Wooden boardwalks creak underfoot, old saloon signs hang above the streets, and every summer thousands of travelers arrive chasing echoes of the same dream that brought fortune seekers here more than a century ago: gold. In 1897, news of the Klondike Gold Rush swept through the continent like wildfire. Ships left from Seattle and San Francisco, packed with men and women desperate to reach the goldfields of Canada's Yukon Territory. Skagway became their gateway, the last port before the treacherous overland routes through the mountains. In less than a year, this quiet bay transformed into a booming frontier town of tents, traders, and opportunists. The population exploded to nearly 20,000, making Skagway one of the wildest settlements in the north. History still lingers on every corner. Along Broadway Street, false front buildings stand much as they did in 1898. The Red Onion Saloon, once a brothel, now serves beer and stories in equal measure. The Golden North Hotel, with its ornate facade, recalls an age when hope and hardship shared the same roof. Inside the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park, visitors can explore restored offices, stables, and supply depots that once fueled the migration north. But perhaps the most vivid reminder of that era is the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway. Built in 1898 against all odds, this narrow-gauge line climbs nearly 3,000 feet from sea level to the mountain pass above, threading through sheer cliffs and misty valleys. Today, the restored trains carry travelers instead of prospectors. Yet the experience remains timeless. As the carriages wind along bridges and tunnels, you can see remnants of the old Trail of 98, where stampeders once hauled a ton of supplies each, the minimum required by Canadian authorities to survive the journey. Many never made it. The contrast between past and present defines Skagway's character. In summer, cruise ships dock by the harbor, and the population swells with visitors. Guides in period costumes stroll the streets, recounting tales of con men like Soapy Smith, who ruled the town through scams and intimidation until his infamous shootout in 1898. Yet, beyond the reenactments and nostalgia, Skagway remains a working community. Small, resilient, and deeply tied to its history. Beyond the town, the wilderness takes over almost instantly. Trails lead into valleys dense with spruce and alder. Rivers run cold and fast, and mountain goats graze on distant slopes. The air carries the scent of pine and sea salt. On clear days, the view down the Lynn Canal, the longest fjord in North America, stretches endlessly. The same vista that greeted those who once set off toward the unknown. Locals often say Skagway is more than a gold rush town. It's a story still being told. Its buildings and artifacts preserve a moment in time. But its people keep the spirit alive. Summer brings music festivals and heritage events. Winter brings silence, when fewer than 1,000 residents stay behind to face the long dark months. In Skagway, the line between legend and reality blurs. The past isn't hidden behind glass. It breathes through the walls, the tracks, and the people who still call this place home. Standing on the platform, as the White Pass train whistles and fades into the mountains, you can almost hear the footsteps of those who came before. Driven by hope, hardship, and the endless pull of the frontier. In southeastern Alaska, Glacier Bay National Park stands as one of the most vivid laboratories of change on Earth. A living timeline of retreating ice, advancing forests, and returning wildlife. Few places reveal the planet's shifting balance as clearly. "200 years ago, this entire bay was a wall of ice. Today, it stretches more than 100 kilometers inland, dotted with fjords, islands, and glaciers that still calve into the sea. Scientists estimate that in the late 1700s, the Grand Pacific Glacier covered nearly all of it. Now, only remnants remain. An evolving map of nature's resilience and motion. Visitors who enter by cruise ship or small boat move through time as much as space. Near the mouth of the bay, dense spruce and hemlock forests cover the slopes. Vegetation that began reclaiming ground less than 2 centuries ago. Deeper in, the green fades to bare rock and ice. The transition is immediate and profound. A natural textbook of ecological succession. Glacier Bay is home to over a dozen tidewater glaciers, each with its own rhythm of advance and retreat. Marjorie Glacier, the most accessible, towers more than 75 meters above the water. From the deck, travelers hear the low thunder of ice calving, a sound that rolls across the bay like distant artillery. When a section breaks free, it crashes into the sea, creating waves that ripple through the still waters. The wildlife here tells a story of renewal. Humpback whales return each summer to feed on krill in the nutrient-rich waters. Sea lions bask on rocky outcrops, while harbor seals haul out on floating ice. Along the shores, brown bears and mountain goats roam where glaciers once stood. Above, bald eagles circle in wide, unhurried arcs. Scientists monitor this constant transformation closely. Instruments track glacial retreat, water temperature, and marine life populations. In some areas, ice has receded more than 60 meters per year, revealing new valleys, streams, and ecosystems. The park, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, serves as both a sanctuary and a benchmark for climate research. For travelers, the experience is deeply visual and elemental. The light shifts from silver to blue to green as clouds move across the peaks. Icebergs float past, streaked with ancient sediment. In the silence, only the sound of dripping meltwater breaks the air. Glacier Bay reminds visitors that Alaska is not a frozen monument, but a place in flux where mountains breathe, ice moves, and the Earth's story continues to unfold before our eyes. In southwestern Alaska, where volcanoes punctuate a rugged coastline, Katmai National Park tells a story of survival, abundance, and raw natural power. Here, two forces define the land: fire from beneath the earth and life on top of it. Volcanoes have shaped valleys and rivers, but it is the brown bears who dominate the story in ways both dramatic and delicate. The most famous scene unfolds at Brooks Falls, where salmon run each summer, leaping upstream against strong currents. Brown bears, some weighing more than 600 kilograms, stand shoulder deep in water, swiping with massive paws to catch fish mid-leap. Cubs scramble clumsily beside their mothers, learning the skills they'll rely on to survive harsh winters. From the observation platforms, visitors see the bears close enough to observe detail. The curve of a paw, The flash of a fish, the glint of wet fur, yet far enough to respect their space. Katmai enforces strict viewing ethics. No feeding, no approaching, and minimal noise. Wildlife here is not a spectacle to control, but a community to witness. Katmai's landscape is defined by its volcanic heritage. The Novarupta eruption of 1912, one of the largest in recorded history, reshaped the park overnight. Valleys filled with ash, rivers changed course, and a new mountain rose where none existed. Today, steam still rises from fumaroles and hot springs in the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, a surreal scene where volcanic soil supports pioneering plant life. The contrast is immediate. Black ash and gray steam juxtaposed with green moss, willow shrubs, and river salmon. Visitors can hike trails that wind past steaming fissures, feeling warmth from the ground and hearing subtle hisses from underground vents. The park's ecosystem is tightly balanced. Salmon bring life to rivers, feeding not only bears but also eagles, foxes, and scavengers. Bears disperse nutrients from the forest to the stream as they consume and deposit, fertilizing vegetation that supports the next season's prey. Scientists study these interactions closely, tracking bear populations, salmon runs, and forest regrowth. This is a place where geology and biology intersect in constant motion. Fire creates the canvas, life paints upon it. Reaching Katmai is an adventure in itself. There are no roads into the park. Visitors fly in small bush planes from king salmon or Kodiak, landing on gravel airstrips near the rivers. From there, boardwalks and trails guide hikers safely through sensitive zones. On cloudy mornings, the mountains vanish into mist, and the roar of waterfalls competes with the occasional snapping of salmon or a bear's grunt. On sunny days, the reflection of the sky in icy rivers makes the brown fur of fishing bears almost luminous. For photographers, naturalists, or travelers seeking immersion, Katmai delivers dramatic, unfiltered Alaska. You see life unfolding at the scale it demands. Patience rewarded with fleeting glimpses of a bear catching its dinner. Clouds swirling over volcanic peaks, steam rising from the still warm soil. Every sight, sound, and smell reinforces that this is a land where nature is both teacher and ruler. By the end of a visit, the lesson is clear. Katmai is not just a destination. It is a system of forces, intertwined and precise, operating far from human interference. The bears are apex predators, yes, but they are also part of a chain that begins underground and flows to the sea. And for anyone watching from the platforms or floating silently on the river, the lesson resonates. In Alaska, power is never abstract. It is alive, immediate, and impossible to ignore. Stretching more than 1,900 kilometers from the Alaskan mainland toward Russia, the Aleutian Islands form a chain of jagged peaks, active volcanoes, and windswept cliffs. A land literally between two continents. This is the edge of North America, where the Pacific and Bering Seas collide, and where isolation and resilience define life. The largest town, Unalaska, anchors the region. Its port, Dutch Harbor, is one of the most productive fishing harbors in the United States, particularly for pollock and crab. Fog drifts in daily, wrapping the mountains in silver blankets. Seabirds wheel overhead, their calls echoing against cliffs that plunge into the churning ocean. Bald eagles perch on the few open rocks, while puffins nest in tiny crevices just above the surf. Everywhere, wind shapes the landscape. Trees bend low, waves pound relentlessly, and snow or rain can arrive without warning. The Aleutians are also steeped in history. During World War II, several islands, including Attu and Kiska, became battlegrounds in the only American soil campaigns fought in Alaska. Remnants remain: abandoned military buildings, rusting guns, and markers honoring those who served. Visiting these sites is a lesson in endurance. The same terrain that challenges wildlife also tested humans. A reminder of how harsh and remote these islands can be. Volcanism dominates the Aleutians. Nearly 40 active volcanoes punctuate the islands, some rising straight from the sea. Smoke or steam often marks their peaks, and occasional eruptions reshape shorelines overnight. Lava flows, volcanic ash, and thermal vents create soils that support unique plant communities. While underwater currents bring nutrients that sustain abundant marine life. Puffins, auklets, and cormorants breed in colonies along cliff edges, while fur seals haul out on rocky beaches. Each species has adapted to a world of wind, cold, and constant change. Traveling here is not simple. There are no roads connecting the islands to the mainland, and few airports handle commercial flights. Access is primarily by small aircraft or ferries, both dependent on unpredictable weather. Storms and fog can delay arrival for days. Life on these islands requires preparation, patience, and respect for the natural rhythms of wind, tide, and temperature. Locals, fishers, scientists, and a few permanent families have learned to read the clouds, understand ocean currents, and anticipate storms that arrive with almost musical regularity. Yet despite the challenges, there is remarkable vitality. The waters teem with salmon and halibut. Brown bears, foxes, and migratory birds thrive. Even under the harshest conditions, life finds a way, sculpted by wind and water, ash and ice. For visitors, the Aleutians are a study in contrasts. Violent seas alongside calm coves, active volcanoes beside quiet tundra, and the modern hum of Dutch Harbor beside ancient ecosystems that have endured millennia. In the Aleutians, isolation is not emptiness. It is perspective. Standing on a cliff edge, wind whipping, seabirds diving, and volcanoes smoking on the horizon. It's clear why this chain has always felt like the boundary of the world. Every step, every breath, every glance carries the weight of survival, adaptation, and the raw beauty of a place defined by extremes. The Aleutians remind travelers that Alaska is not a single landscape, but a collection of edges, each one alive, each one shaping everything that comes into contact with it. Alaska's vastness is easy to measure, over 663,000 square miles, making it larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Its mountains, rivers, glaciers, and coasts dominate maps. But the true measure of the state lies in how people interact with it. From Anchorage to the Aleutians, from Denali's peaks to the Arctic Ocean, Alaska teaches a single lesson. Wildness is not only a condition of land, but also a framework for human life. What does wild mean today? It is not merely empty space or dramatic scenery. It is a landscape that operates independently of human schedules, economies, or conveniences. Glaciers advance and retreat. Rivers flood and carve valleys. Caribou migrate across tundra regardless of how many travelers watch from trails or trains. The rhythm of these forces demands attention, respect, and patience. Living with the wild means recognizing limits, acknowledging that nature will not always bend to desire. Alaska is also a laboratory of resilience. Katmai's brown bears, Glacier Bay's whales, and Denali's caribou herds demonstrate how species recover when protected, how ecosystems rebalance after disruption. In the last century, conservation efforts have returned wolves, sea otters, and bald eagles to regions where they were once absent. Today, roughly 60% of Alaska's land is protected in national parks, refuges, and preserves, a scale unmatched elsewhere in the United States. These measures are not symbolic. They are the basis for ecological recovery and continuity. Yet wildness is not only about species or territory. It is also about human endurance and connection. Communities like Barrow and Talkeetna show adaptation at extremes, where culture, tradition, and knowledge allow survival in some of the planet's harshest conditions. Visitors witness that endurance in everyday actions, hauling supplies, reading the weather, and planning around frozen rivers or endless daylight. Wildness in this sense is both a test and a teacher. Alaska's extremes also illuminate our impact. Mendenhall Glacier retreats by meters each year. Rivers shift with warming permafrost, and tidewater glaciers in Glacier Bay continue to recede. Observation, measurement, and stewardship are not optional. They are essential. The information gathered here informs global understanding of climate, wildlife management, and human adaptation to environmental change. For travelers, the lesson is practical. Witnessing wild Alaska is not about conquering or controlling it. It is about observing, learning, and acting responsibly. Trails, platforms, and guided tours exist to balance access with preservation. Boats, bush planes, and ferries minimize footprint while maximizing experience. Every visitor participates in a network of care, intentional or otherwise. Standing on a tundra ridge, at a glacier's edge, or along a fjord, it is possible to understand the scale of what has been preserved and what remains fragile. Alaska's wild is measurable in numbers, parks covering over 223 million acres, wildlife populations rebounding in dozens of species, rivers that remain free-flowing, and seas rich with marine life. It is visible in human adaptation, in the culture of stewardship, and in the stories of people who live, work, and explore in this extraordinary landscape. Wildness, ultimately, is both a landscape and a responsibility. Alaska's mountains, ice fields, and coasts will endure with or without human presence. But the connection we forge, through observation, care, and knowledge, ensures that wildness continues as a resource for science, recreation, and culture. It is measurable, it is fragile, and it is alive. And in that balance between scale, beauty, and human involvement, the meaning of wild becomes clear. It is a partnership between life and landscape, an ongoing lesson in resilience, respect, and stewardship. But what do you think? Let us know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to check out the wonders of Pakistan.